let's give a little bit of a background here what this is. So I know the national news has probably picked up the story. It's very salacious. Um, let's give you a little background. So there is this program, and it's called the California Dream for All, which has already been in effect for only 1 year. It was initially conceived as focusing on higher cost parts of the state where it's especially hard to use existing down payment programs. And that was not an unequivocal success. So they started this program where you can apply and includes a requirement that at least one home buyer in each transaction be a first generation home buyer, defined as someone who has never owned a home and whose parents also did not own a home, or someone who grew up in foster care. The state also lowered the income eligibility threshold from 150% of the area median income to 120%, a number that ranges from $95,000 a year in Fresno County to about $215,000 in Santa Clara County. So the goal of it was that they were going to give out these loans, and I put loans in quotes because it's not, well, it's a loan that you have to pay back to the state eventually, but it's not like a loan that you have to like pay back
Kind of,
monthly.
kind of
Kind
eventually.
of. There's, yeah, it's like it depends on whether you sell the house at like a markup and you can, then you have to pay the state back. If I think if you sell it at a loss, you don't have to pay back the state, or if you hold on to it forever, they haven't figured that part out yet. What happens if you just hold on to it forever and put it in a trust and keep handing it down to your kids? Will the state ever get paid back? Who knows? Um, I mean, politicians don't think that far ahead. They just think about the immediate news headline. So that has already been in effect. That's the program that has been in effect here in California. It was a rousing success when it first was implemented. What was it, like 80,000 people applied for the first year and
Yes,
only 1,700, right?
yes. 1,700
So,
were like basically via lottery. Were lucky enough to snag those loans.
right. Not great odds, but it was obviously enormously popular because if you can get $150,000 as someone who has went to go look to buy a house in the past couple of years, $150,000 down payment can really help with those monthly payment in the mortgage in buying a house in California. I mean, if you think about, some people are putting like 3% down. If you're putting 150 down, it's pretty good on a, it's almost 10, 20% on a lot of stuff. So it's a big chunk of change. So this new bill that has been making its way through the California legislature, which is now being kind of noticed by everybody in the national news, it's been slowly making its way through, and now all of a sudden everyone's starting to pay attention to it. It's AB 1840, Home Purchase Assistance Program eligibility. It was amended by the Senate and was advanced by the Senate. It says existing law establishes the California Housing Finance Agency and the Department of Housing and Community Development and authorizes the agency to, among other things, make loans to finance affordable housing, including residential structures, housing developments, multifamily rental housing, special needs housing, and other forms of housing as specified. Okay, so that's everything we already know. That's the California Dream for All. But here is where the controversy comes in. They amended it to say this bill would specify that an applicant who meets all other requirements for a loan under the program, so that's everything we talked about, like income requirement, first generation, everything like that, but not limited to any requirements imposed on the agency administering the program by specified entities and who is otherwise eligible under applicable federal and state law, shall not be disqualified solely based on the applicant's immigration status. So that's new. That's what
Yes,
they're adding.
yes,
So to answer the question, is California giving home loans to illegal immigrants? Possibly. I say possibly because we'll get to that in a little bit. Foreshadowing. So that is making its way through right now. We need special effects. I
it's
missed.
like
Oh, I
the sound.
forgot the stinger for the. I forgot the stinger for the cringy moment. But anyway, so right now it's in progress as of 8/19. Introduced first committee review, first chamber. Now it has to go back through second committee review, second chamber. So it's got some steps to go through. But the fact that it's making its way through the legislature, obviously is raising some
Right. It
eyebrows.
passed Assembly. It's now in Senate. So
Mm-hmm.
it's had a good run so far.
Mm-hmm. I feel like we need to do like a Schoolhouse Rocks episode where like we explain like how does a bill become a law in California. So this is from Zero Hedge, which is sort of I guess you could say it's a national news. It's very popular. Zero Hedge. I like Zero Hedge. I like reading the economic news on Zero Hedge. And I saw this, and I think I saw this last week, and that's when I sent it to you and said, okay, this is going to be this week's episode. Zero Hedge says progressive lawmakers in California have pushed forward a bill that prioritizes illegal aliens over veterans and hardworking citizens by offering them zero down payment loans through the state's first time home buyer program. This outrageous legislation is a slap in the face to California citizens who are already struggling under failed Bidenomics, which has triggered an inflation storm nationwide. Quote, the social and economic benefits of home ownership should be available to everyone. As such, the California Dream for All program should be available to all, wrote Assembly member Joaquin Arambula, a Democrat from Fresno, who's the lead author of Assembly Bill 1840. Arambula said, quote, when undocumented individuals are excluded from such programs, they miss out on a crucial method of securing financial security and personal stability for themselves and their families. State Senator Brian Daly, friend of the show, called AB 1840, quote, an insult to California citizens who are being left behind and priced out of home ownership, adding, I'm all for helping first-time homebuyers, but give priority to those who are here in our state legally. Supervisor Jim Desmond, another friend of the show, quote, our state is already facing a housing crisis. Adding more strain through AB 1840 is not the approach. Desmond warned, quote, California cannot afford to continue rewarding illegal immigration while neglecting its fiscal responsibilities to its citizen. This bill will worsen the state's deficit and increase the tax burden on hardworking Californians. So, any thoughts right off the bat about this bill?
So I have questions, but I'm going to reserve my questions because maybe you'll answer them as we go, or maybe I'll
Sure.
come up with more questions.
Sure. Okay. There was a video. Let me see if I could pull this up. We love our videos
When they work.
when they work. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay. Hold on. So, talk about Elena Kounalakis. Is that how you pronounce her name? Okay. This is from CBS 8 San Diego. So, this was local news, and this came out just recently.
A proposed bill working its way through Sacramento could make it easier for undocumented immigrants to purchase a home in California. It's called AB 1840.
AB 1840 adds specific wording to the California Dream for All program, which is the state's down payment assistance program. The wording would make undocumented immigrants able to apply for this money. I spoke with the author of the bill and the petition against it.
That it was a dream for all, that's what we meant.
Assemblyman Dr. Joaquin Arambula from Fresno is the author of AB 1840. The bill says that applicants of the state's Dream for All program should not be disqualified based on their immigration status. The Dream for All program is a down payment assistance program for low to moderate income aspiring homeowners. Those selected get a 20% down payment on a home that has to be paid back plus interest if the homeowner sells it.
For many people who have been here for years, if not decades, because we have a broken immigration system, who have been paying taxes and doing their hard work as well of building up a credit score, that we need to figure out how to open doors for all people to realize that dream of home ownership.
We shouldn't move people to the front of the line that haven't paid their dues.
El Cajon Mayor Bill Wells, who's also running for Congress, says he disagrees with AB 1840. He says the money for the California Dream for All Act should only go to legal U.S. citizens and veterans assistance programs.
They should be first in line to buy homes and to get assistance, not people that to work for this country. And, in fact, some that come from countries that our young men and women were actually fighting against.
Assemblyman Arambula says the money in the Dream for All program should be available to everyone who qualifies, which means they have to have a social security number or an I-10 number. He says there are already programs for veterans and more in the works.
We're passing housing bonds that ultimately will allow us to bring resources specifically for our veterans, and look forward to the opportunity to make sure that we're able to walk and chew gum at the same time.
I don't understand why we're letting people that have lived here all their lives and sometimes for generations twist in the wind and not be able to afford their own home.
So if passed and signed by the governor, AB 1840 could go into effect in January of 2025.
Interesting. He said the point about, well, you need a social security number and you need an IT number. Both those numbers require you to apply, and they require you to file proof of certain things. They require you to follow laws in terms of getting a social security number. It's not an easy process to get a social security number. You have to go through the whole immigration process. So it sounds like he's backtracking, or he's trying to cover his tracks in the sense of, well, you have to have a social security number and you have to have an IT number. It's like, okay, so it's not truly for undocumented, but he's trying to also say it's for undocumented, which doesn't make sense because you can't be undocumented and also possess those numbers.
That was one of my questions. Because yes, that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
I don't understand the process. And I was looking up, I'm like, what qualifies you as undocumented? But then as I'm reading all this, I'm like, but then you're documented. Like,
Right. So
I just want
you're
to point out
admitting
that the author of this, I'm pretty sure he said Pacifically and not specifically, and that annoyed me.
well, nobody said that a lot of these Sacramento politicians were very smart. They just happened to get elected. Yeah, that stuck out at me as if they're trying to assuage people of, now that people have figured it out. Look, if you read that bluntly, if you look at it, and let's go back to it, and I want to read it one more time. It says, you shall not be disqualified solely based on the applicant's immigration status. Plain reading, and I'm going to put my little lawyer hat on right now. Plain reading, if I was reading that and I had to argue that in court, means you can't be disqualified based on your immigration status, whether that's legal, illegal, whether you're, green card, H-1B, or your work visa, student visa, all that stuff. So basically any immigration status would fall under this, which would include undocumented or illegal. So to back away and say, oh, now you need an IT number or you need social security number, then you're not completely undocumented. There is documentation of you somewhere. You have to get that number somehow. The immigration department doesn't just hand those out.
Okay, I'm sorry for being dumb. If you get a green card, do you have a social security number?
No, I don't. I think you get a tax ID number.
Okay. Because technically,
pretty sure.
Like an undocumented immigrant could be an expired green card or visa holder. So if they maybe did have some documents, but then it expired, at least that was from, like I said, I was like looking this up because I was trying to figure out when I was reading this whole thing and I watched that video because you had sent it to me, and I was like, wait, documents, but and I got all confused. So I did start looking up, well, what qualifies someone as being an undocumented immigrant, and expiration status does count. So I'm wondering if that's, I don't know.
I mean, I think it just means any sort of any status, whether you're expired, whether your green card's expired, whether your visa is expired, whether you're here legally or illegally. The plain reading is that it applies to literally anybody, regardless of immigration status, which would open it up to, okay, if you qualify. So if you meet those other qualifications of you're a first generation home buyer, you meet this income level and everything, then you would qualify. And I think that's, yes, is it going to be overwhelmed with people who are applying who are illegal? Probably not. But the fact that this has been added to a law, I think is concerning to a lot of people. And I think that's why it's getting national news, is because people are sitting here going, what is California doing that they're handing out home loans to people who could be illegal immigrants? Like, I think that's where the frustration's coming in.
Well, right. Yes, obviously, because like we talked about, like we have our veterans and stuff, and we do have so many homeless veterans. And why are we helping those people before we help our own. But I have questions on the status here of how long do these people have to have been in California? Like, what kind of established residency do they have to have? Because now, does this mean that we're going to have an influx of illegal, undocumented immigrants coming from other states who are like, oh, I can finally own a home. I'm going to go to California and apply, or which we'll get to that. Like, if they have to be here for a year or whatever, we'll get to, that part down the road because of things that have progressed today. But I genuinely wonder, like, can they just start coming in to New York or whatever, and then they come to California because they're like, well, I can finally own a home. But how long do they have to have been here or working here? Or I have questions about that.
I think we are kind of going back and forth about this before the show, and this is probably the biggest concern for a lot of people. If you're looking at the macro side of it, it's the idea that it's a beacon to those who do want to come illegally. That if you come to California, you're going to get preferential or equal treatment as those who are citizens. Not necessarily preferential, because we're going to look at another article in a second that shows it's not preferential treatment, but the fact that you're going to be treated as a citizen, meaning you don't have to go through the rigmarole of actually becoming a citizen. You can show up, and regardless of immigration status. And I think that's the bigger concern, is it sends out this message of like, well, if you show up in California, there's a lot of programs that can help you. And there's a lot of politicians who are very sympathetic towards you. So if you go to California, and it's a sanctuary state, and they won't work with federal government, they won't report you. That does send out a big kind of beacon to everyone around the world that just come to California and you'll get all access to all these programs, which
you will
is
get
probably the most concerning thing.
Food assistance, housing assistance, Medi-Cal, free abortions. Your kids can all be in school. If you're pregnant, you get free maternity care, including postpartum care.
Hey, thanks for checking out the California Underground podcast. If you enjoyed that clip, make sure you subscribe, like, share, review, comment, all that stuff that helps with the algorithm, helps people find us more. And if you want to learn more, you can always listen to our full podcast at Apple, Spotify, Google, all those different places that you basically find podcasts. Or if you just want to keep watching clips, you can check out clips here, or you can subscribe to our channel right here, somewhere in here.